We're in Roebling, New Jersey at the Roebling Museum, which documents a steel mill that used to be here in the early 1900s until the 1980s, and life in a company town that was built here to support the mill. We'll visit the museum, Historic Roebling Village, and mill yard artifacts. On our walk to the former gatehouse of the mill, we passed by signs that summarize the work of the mill to convert scrap metal to high-quality steel wire, key steps in the process, and a summary of the mill's closure and subsequent cleanup. Our visit to the museum starts with a movie summarizing the lives of John Roebling and his sons Washington, Charles, and Ferdinand. John Roebling was born in Prussia in 1806, trained in architecture and engineering in Berlin, emigrated to Pennsylvania in 1831, and started producing wire rope in 1841. He demonstrated the use of wire rope in suspension bridges, built several, and died in 1869 while working on the Brooklyn Bridge. Washington Roebling took over the design and construction of the Brooklyn Bridge, but got seriously afflicted by decompression sickness, the bends, while working on the foundations of the Brooklyn Bridge. His wife Emily taught herself bridge construction and worked with her bedridden husband to complete this bridge. Charles, Ferdinand, and Washington built this company into the world's leading producer of wire rope. In 1904, they purchased farmland south of Trenton and built a steel mill here and expanded steel rope production. They also built and managed a company town for many employees, later selling these houses to workers and others in the 1940s. The Roebling Company sold the mill in 1952 with its final closure in 1974. This exhibit provides a timeline of key events with the Roebling family, bridge building, mill expansion, up to the sale of the mill in 1952. This exhibit provides more details on the Roeblings, including Washington Roebling's Civil War experiences, his mansion in Trenton, and his extensive gem collection, which formed the basis of the Smithsonian collection. Charles Roebling's son Washington II raced cars made by the Mercer Automotive Company, which is run by the Roeblings, and he died in a Titanic. Deeper descriptions of bridge engineering are provided, with specific examples using the Brooklyn Bridge. Additional information is provided on the working conditions and technologies in Roebling's Trenton plants and the steel mills here at the Concora Works, where Concora was the name of a railway village near the site. The work was hard and dirty, but the pay was considered good. Two pay stubs from 1948 are shown, one for $40 and the other for nearly $48. Information on construction of suspension bridges, including the George Washington Bridge in New York and the Golden Gate Bridge in California. Besides bridges, wire rope was used for airplanes and submarine nets in World War II. Since Roebling recruited immigrant workers heavily, Roebling Village included many ethnicities and languages. These exhibits talk about life in this company town, with stories from different perspectives over the years, including resident support for the armed services. Another exhibit poses questions about work, with answers directly related to experiences in Roebling. There are displays on housework, safety measures, the layout of the village, lighter duty dirty work, the high birth rate in Roebling, and more. The photo shows the view of the mill from this gateway before the buildings were taken down. Note that the covered area and walkway at the right side of the photo matches the covered area and walkway just beyond the glass. This display highlights some of the homes and residents of Roebling Village, including family members, birthplaces, occupations, and pay. These row houses next to the gatehouse are rented to foreign laborers, initially with rents at $8.50 per month. In 1940, rent had increased to $15 per month. Now we'll take a walking tour of the historic village of Roebling. The first houses we'll see are row houses for foreign laborers. These were closest to the noise of the mills. Roebling sold off the houses in the 1940s after the mills were unionized, with the employee residents getting the first opportunity to buy them. This is the first schoolhouse used in Roebling Village for grades 1 to 3. It is now a private residence. Interior house colors and exteriors were controlled when these homes were owned by Roebling. Current homeowners have much more freedom to make changes. This duplex on Riverside Avenue would have been rented to higher-ranking employees, possibly managers. Roebling Inn. This was the first permanent structure built by the Roeblings which remains today. Rent here during construction of the mill and village was $2 per week for room and board. In 1910, it was used as a hotel and bar. At one time, there were 2 bowling lanes in the basement. It is now used for senior citizen apartments. Here is a monument to Ferdinand, Charles, and Washington Roebling to commemorate their founding of Roebling Village. Roebling Park has an excellent view of the Delaware River and Pennsylvania just across the river. This larger standalone house on Riverside Avenue would have been for senior management. The Roebling Auditorium was built in 1915 to provide entertainment for the workers. It was the site for vaudeville shows, minstrels, boxing matches, and movies. It was one of the first air-conditioned buildings in America using blocks of ice in front of fans. This building houses the Roebling Volunteer Fire Company No. 3. This building had been a general store from 1906 up to 1959, with a broad variety of goods being sold, including food and furniture. It was one of the first indoor shopping malls in America. It now has a pizzeria and grocery deli. A monument to Charles Roebling. These buildings are boarding houses for workers. Room and board cost $2.50 per week, which included a hot lunch delivered to the worker at the mill each day. Grades 3 through 6 were taught in one of the buildings until the early 1930s. Let's head back to the gatehouse to visit the mill yard. These long metal structures bounded the area where scrap metal and pig iron arrived at the mill and were dumped into piles reaching 40 feet high. 2 electromagnetic cranes ran on these elevated rails to gather and move these metals to rail cars for processing into steel. Ladle and charging bucket. The ladle was used to move molten steel from the furnace to the molds. The charging bucket was used with electric furnaces to measure and mix ingredients for steel. This 24-foot, 124-ton flywheel was used to provide inertia to the rollers for flattening preheated ingots. This forklift carried hot slag in a slag pot 1 mile to the dumping area. 14 miles of train track ran through the mill, with 6 diesel engines and 2 diesel cranes. This building was the only other one from the steel mill that was not removed during the Superfund cleanup. It was most recently used for safety equipment and badging. It looks like time cards are processed here. This pile has original wire rope cables from the George Washington Bridge in New York, which were recently replaced with new cables. I found this museum and historic village worth visiting. Thanks for making it to the end of this video. Please hit like and subscribe to help it get shared.